Welcome to episode 2 of Swatch and Learn. Thanks for tuning in today. My name is Stephanie Sheridan, and I'll be hosting along with Lisa Rubel, who is the editor of the Fat Quarterly publication. I'd also like to introduce our two guests for today. First, we have Ruth Beck, who is the Senior Director of Creative and Design with Benartex. Ruth, do you want to say hi to everyone?
Hello, everyone.
And we also have Jen Wagner, who is one of our 2025 social stars and the owner of Snapdragon Quilting. Hi, Jen.
Hi, thank you so much for having me on today, Stephanie.
All right. So the Fat Quarterly has been in print for over 25 years as a way to share our amazing fabrics directly with you, the consumer. While the format and the articles contained in the issues have changed over the years, the one thing that has not changed is our dedication to the quilting community and to you, our subscribers. We have lots of exciting things to share with you today. Please note that we will have time for questions at the end. So if you have a question during any of the presentations, you can pop them into the Q&A box that you see along the bottom of your screen. So let's get started by looking at all the beautiful fabrics in the Blooming Color 2 collection that's featured in the spring. It's spring, right? The spring issue. Okay, so let me do a quick share screen and I'll show you the fabrics. Okay, can everyone see my screen?
Hmm.
All righty. So Blooming Color 2 is by Wolff Paper. And for all the lovers of modern florals, Blooming Color is back. There was a Blooming Color 1. It's in a different colorway and some slightly different fabrics. But this time, we explore the other side of the color spectrum with shades of blue, turquoise, green, and little pops of yellow that can easily be matched with the Blooming Color 1 collection. There are 6 new floral prints in this in a variety of scales, and these beautiful botanical fabrics are bursting with design possibilities, and you'll see lots of them here today. There are 28 SKUs in this collection, and it will start shipping to stores next month. So let's take a closer look at a few of the fabrics. So we have Olivia, which is a larger scale floral, and Anna, which is more of a scattered all over print. And again, all of these are in shades with yellows, greens, blues, and teal turquoise colors. We also have Emmy, which is a more structured print, and Dora, which has a subtle stripe to it. And then the blenders. What collection wouldn't be complete without some blenders, right? We have Isla, Bryn, and Carolyn, and they're actually really well shaded from lighter to a medium tone to a dark. So those are the fabrics. They also come in our full assortment of pre-cuts. There is a 10 by 10 pack, a strippy set, a 5 by 5 pack, and a fat quarter box, which it has 80 fat quarters in it. And then let's take a look at a few of the projects. The free pattern called Efflorescence was designed by Joni Holton. It finishes at 53 inches by 63 inches, and that pattern is available on our website. Hedged Blossoms, designed by Bound to Be Quilting. It's a very large quilt at 88 by 88, so a great queen-sized quilt. And you can find that at boundtobequilting.com. And then we have 3 more Honey Blossoms, designed by Everyday Stitches, which is a 46 by 45 wall hanging. The Molly Bag, designed by Sally Tomato, which is a great purse size. And then Broadening, designed by Laureen Smith, which is a 61 by 73, so a great throw-sized quilt. So those are just a few of the projects that you can make with Blooming Color 2. And please visit our website to see more information about all of these projects and the fabrics themselves. So let me stop my share. And we'll move into our next presenter. Now that we've seen and talked about all of the fabrics, let's learn a little bit more about the design process behind the beauty of these botanical fabrics. Ruth Beck has been working with Benartex for over 15 years, and she works very closely with a lot of our designers to make their visions into the fabric that you guys get to use. Ruth, can you tell us a little bit more about the design process that happened with Blooming Color 2?
Yes, I'll tell you a little bit about the line itself and then the process. So the reason I'm sitting here in front of a table of fabric and also a board of the process is I will be going back and forth to explain both of these things to you. So welcome to the next exciting journey of patterns for Wolff Paper. Blooming Color 1 stimulated our senses with the mid-tone bright floral mix. Do you remember this? As quilters, you may have seen this out there in the stores. Okay. We're now going deeper into the garden for inspiration and color. So as designers, we're always looking for the next color palette. And this year, 2025, I have a light bulb here to remind us that it's a year of color green. So even though there are other colors that are very important and come into play, there's never been more greens in our lives than there are now. So some of those greens you will see are carried out with fabrics you may have in your stash or you're familiar with in Benartex. You also can pull that together as a story. So we like to think about it is where do those greens come from? And we go to the runway, we look at nature itself and just how many greens you can find that will stimulate the process. So with that in mind, I'll tell you about Nancy Wolff, who is the true designer of this line. She's an award-winning illustrator with a full career as a textile designer and has experimented with every imaginable surface that led her into a career in paper. So she leads a design studio that specializes in distinct handmade wallpaper purpose for home decor. So home decor is slightly different than our industry, meaning quilting. And it really, the most biggest thing about it is the difference in scale, which I'll get to. But Nancy's design studio is called Loba Lu, which is wallpaper inspired by her last name. Loba means wolf in Spanish. So Wolff Paper is our name for the quilting fabric, two wolves. Okay, Blooming Color 2 includes flowers designed with color harmony and pleasing layouts that echo gardens with a mix of plantings. So symmetry of shape and form is key for the designer as she thinks of designs that work well together, like a jigsaw puzzle, making things fit. That's what her process is, to design it as she goes and, making it pleasing to the eye, using natural vine and movement that draws the eye into the design and then juxtaposing it with geometry. So with every flower that you see, you're going to see a little, a whimsical, fun geometry pattern that kind of is the coordination that goes with everything. So the inside look at how the line comes together is, starting with Nancy's artful eye, translating her home decor style into a scale that we can use as quilters. So basically, I'm going to just start to move things around here. When you start to print patterns, we use a software, Photoshop will then give us these really large print papers, okay? And it looks like fabric, and the nice part about it is it should look pretty close to the fabric you buy because we do it by color so that we're coming close to the color you're going to see in fabric. But you want to do this in a way that you get the scale that's usable for you. So when we first get Nancy's patterns, we get something quite large. Okay, so this is looking like, look at it compared to my, I wouldn't wear this. I wouldn't, and then if you say, I have to bring this down to the scale now of what a quilter would use. So you check it out and you check it out with this template and it's not going to work for you, right? So this is a 5-inch template. And you can see by just taking the template, and we have these templates in our studio, you can see where you can move this template slightly and get a point of interest everywhere you move it. Okay, so this became the right scale, which is 50%. Reduction is 50% from Nancy's original size. So the quilt size is determined by the scale as well as the checkpoint, which can be usable as a sewing template. Okay, blooming color 2 mixes florals like a garden, tall plantings, vining florals, and shorter ground cover types. So choosing patterns that work well together. And then you add color. So as I said before, green is the key for the collection, inspired by the runway, taking this cue from nature. We have greens that we have in blush. Let me just show you that card. You probably all have blush. You probably all know it's been around longer than me. Okay, so this is a very, well-loved blush card. So it's really not the most beautiful thing, but you can see it's got many, many colors. And out of this whole palette, blush, we have picked several shades, and we picked lime and Kelly green. And I'm going to show you how that relates to the fabric. Okay, so basically, it's coming close enough to you. You look at the fabric and how it's coordinating. You can take these two colors, and they will go beautifully with the palette in the greens. Okay, so that would be your lime and your Kelly green. Going with the bright greens, blooming color 2. And then you hit blue palette, and you have cerulean and twilight coming close and showing the blush colors. Okay, moving down to the popular teal family, which I think we all love to work with. You can see again the colors and how they coordinate. And here we have Aruba and Lagoon. And then to let the sun in, I think it's always important to have yellow. And I love the way Nancy has included this in a really nice spirited way. It's not just a subtle yellow, it plays two kinds of yellows, a warm and sort of a lighter, to make that whole collection shine. So the beauty of all of it is taking this whole color harmony and making it work together. So the better basics we talked about, and there are other basics you could work with. I mean, Benartex has superior solids and other, lovely basics. You can find them all in this catalog, and I'm sure you can find other colors that work. But I chose blush because it was something very classic and that we tend to suggest with this collection. And then other fun we have in building a collection includes naming the patterns. Okay, you think, do you ever know where patterns come from? So sometimes we get stuck. We think, how would you name a floral collection? And in this case, we needed a lot of names. So we started asking, who can we name these, patterns after? We'll just choose, girl names. So some of them are our friends. Okay, like Isla might be a friend. Okay, or someone's daughter. Okay, but it was just to kind of, find something to work with. And then you have to, when you're naming patterns, you have to find names that haven't been used before, collection names too. And that's very tricky because you might love a collection and say, well, I can't use it. I mean, do you know how many garden names, how many collections we've had here that with the name garden in it? So I didn't use garden. Okay, I used blooming color. And then once you get a collection name that works, you hope that you have more collections to come, so that's how we build it. That's what we try to do is, have a little fun in the process, bring in the color, and then the effect is a beautiful blooming palette ready to explore with needle and thread. So anyway, hope this helps. Is there anything I can, I guess in the Q&A, we can ask questions.
Right, right. Ruth, you and I
Okay.
had talked about earlier, you talking about like the process from going from the print to fabric. And I know there's a couple of steps in there, and especially like with the strike offs. Do you want to talk
Mhm.
about that process just a little
Okay,
bit?
just a little bit. I didn't bring any strike-offs to show you because in this case, the strike-offs were so good. Sometimes you have strike-offs that need tender loving care, and you could say, okay, I didn't get the green I wanted, so I had to change it. But before you get the actual production fabric, you get a test fabric, and the test fabric is called a strike off. And it looks very much like what we're seeing here. I mean, it could look very much like this, for instance. Okay, but maybe their cast of the blue is a little bit off. And then you do make a comment on that. In this case, we even like to ask Nancy because she colored the line. So we want to make sure she's happy also with the color. So we it came in looking well, so we didn't have a lot of changes, but that strike off after we get that is about 4 weeks after we send the artwork. And then we release it for production unless we have any major changes. And it could be in the next 4 to 6 weeks that we hope to get production. But along to help us in the way, we do make these charts. Okay, so this chart is taking a little piece of all this bit, large scale printout. Okay, and then we just show a little piece with the numbers that would be made in the professional color cards that go out to the industry. And in tandem with this, we have this, which is a line chart. Okay, and this I have to come a little closer, maybe you can see it. And this is our Bible actually, because we put all the information that we need, whether it has pearlescent, whether it's, regular cotton print, the color, the numbers, and you can see where if it's one pattern, it might have several colorways, and it looks like a little family, right? So this goes into a book and we refer to it, over and over. And if an order is written, it's written from this, this line chart. So it would be, strike off after line chart, production, and then we hope the designers take fabric to do some sampling, perhaps make these beautiful quilts like you're all showing behind you. And, basically that's the process. But the designers work in Photoshop. So there is, before it even gets to anything two-dimensional, it's on a screen. And there's where you can make your changes. So a change might be, okay, maybe this could be interesting. Let's say this is where you started, okay? Let's say you go to the small one and just maybe there's a line in here that you realize when you shrunk it down is going to be too tight to print. So sometimes you need to move a line or make a line, give a little more space, or do something so it isn't going to clog up in the printing process. So, when Nancy designs it for home deck, she really didn't design it for this scale, even though it looks beautiful at that scale. There might be a slight revision made just for that purpose. Hope that's helpful.
It really is, Ruth. Thank you so
Okay.
much. All right. So now that we've heard about the fabrics and we've seen them and we've talked about how they came to be, let's talk about what to do with them. Lisa Rubel is here to show us her project, Spring Zigzags, and it's featured on page 6 in the issue. And she is going to show us her project, talk a little bit about it, and then show us some really great tips and tricks for making all the half square triangles. Lisa?
Stephanie. So I had a lot of fun working with this fabric line because as a quilt pattern designer, the things that I often look for making it easy to design quilts is differences in value, differences in scale, and of course color as well. And I've got my leftovers right here of this whole line. And what I loved about this line is that it had these 4 distinct colorways. And it was, not, oh, I think maybe these go together, but it's very obviously you've got your green, your yellows, the turquoise, which is definitely my favorite. I laughed when Ruth said that. And then also the blues. So everything that Ruth was saying, it was like, yes, that was why I loved this line so much. And so when I went to design the project for this line, I wanted to play off of those colorways. And you can see my quilt behind me, Spring Zigzags. And so what I decided to do was to make a row of blocks using each of those lines because they read so specifically as the blue, the green, the yellow, and the turquoise. I thought that that would work really well. And so I picked half square triangles because when you're making half square triangles, you are getting basically half of that square. So some of the larger prints like this one, you get to see plenty of those flowers and those leaves in there because you get half of that 5-inch square. And then I decided to pair all of those prints with white because this is our spring issue. We wanted it to be springy and airy and light, and the white was just the perfect color for all four of these colorways to pop off of. So I mocked up, uh, first of all, just the inside of this, these zigzags, which is just made by rotating your half square triangles. And then I started playing around with what I could do from there. And I'm going to share my screen and show you what I did. Okay, everyone can see it? Yep. Fantastic. So this is what I started out with when I just put those half square triangles together. And it's 56 half square triangles, and it made a quilt that measured 28 by 32 inches. And one of the things I think of when I'm designing these projects is what they can be used for. And so 28 by 32 could definitely be a wall hanging. You could even make skinnier rows of zigzags and make it into a long zigzag table runner. But I wanted to see what I could do to make this a larger quilt so that it could lay over the top of a couch or be used as a lap quilt, that type of thing. So I started looking at different ways to add borders. And it's not letting me change. Hang on. There we go. Oops, I went two. Okay. It just was a little delayed. So the first thing I did was just your basic, let's add some borders. So I picked three different prints from the collection, each one that kind of read, not the color, but read like looking at it, read more as a solid or a tonal with the inner green border, the yellow pluses, and then the blue flowers to the outside. Because when we're making quilts, that's the easiest way to make a quilt larger, right? Is to put some borders on. So I wanted to try it this way first and see how it would look just doing your basic, a 2-inch border, a 3-inch border, a 4-inch border kind of thing. And that works fine. And I definitely could have played around with putting some of the larger florals in it just to see how that looked. But the inside of this quilt center is so airy and it's got those white zigzags that go through that really let it breathe. And I just felt like the borders were squishing it and cramping it in a little bit. So I decided to go in a different direction. And I decided to alternate white and print borders. And the bonus of course, the more borders that I add on, the larger this quilt got. So the more it would cover if you were using it as a snuggle quilt or laying across a chair or something like that. So I started with the white because that allowed the zigzags to float on both ends as well. And then, of course, the first color that I tried out was the turquoise because, like I said today, and I think I probably said on the last Swatch and Learn, is turquoise is one of my favorites. So I gravitate towards that immediately. And so here's what my first design looked like. I did a real skinny turquoise border between two slightly thicker white borders. And then I went for a very wide floral border so I could show off that print. And that print is one of my favorites in the collection because it reads a little bit like a stripe, but not so much that you get distracted by it. And it just has all kinds of different fun blooms inside. And because I designed digitally, I decided that I would just try all the different prints in that border to see which color scheme I like the best. So that was the first. And then there's the version with the blue. And then the green, which when Ruth was talking and I learned that green was the focus for this collection, I kind of chuckled because I really did like that one a lot, in addition, of course, to the turquoise. But then this is what I ultimately went with, which this is the yellow print. And I went with it for a couple different reasons. First of all, I really liked the fact that of all of the prints, all of the colors of this print, this one really shows all four of the colors in it. You can see the yellow, the green, the turquoise, and the blue in those flowers. So it really set off the different zigzag stripe rows beautifully in that respect. I also liked how it was very airy, which was sort of the theme I was going for with this quilt because it didn't have a dark background color. It just seemed to let the quilt design continue to kind of breathe through it. And if you are paying close attention, and I noticed this when I was putting these slides together, so when I design digitally, I'm more looking for just the general idea of the quilt. So that's what you see here. And I'm going to stop my screen share. And if you look behind me, you can see I actually put the zigzag rows in a different order than they were in the digital quilt. And that happens sometimes because you put things in digital to see, do I like this in general? Do I like this concept? I'll figure out what works best in what spot later. And when I went to lay these out, I decided that this was the order that I liked better. So a little bit different, but may not have been something that anyone besides me noticed. And then for the quilting, I did straight line quilting, and I do not like marking quilts, which is a little theme we'll get to when we get to the half square triangles. So I did zigzag lines, and basically the first line that I did, I used the edge of a zigzag as my guide, and then just went from that line all the way across and then echo quilted off of that first set of lines. So I didn't have to mark the quilt, but I got some really nice lined texture. And then one other thing I wanted to show you, which you would not have seen in the issue, is that there is also a wide back for this fabric collection. And so I used this great turquoise fabric on the back, and wide backs I love because you don't have to do that, that piecing line down the center between your two widths of fabric to make it wide enough for your quilt back. So now that I've talked a little bit about the quilt, I'm going to switch over to my other camera and show you my favorite way to make half square triangles. So as I mentioned with the machine quilting, I'm not a huge fan of having to mark a lot of lines because it takes a while. And with 56 half square triangles in this quilt, that's a lot of line drawing. And so this summer I came across a ruler, a tool called the Ideal Seam Guide from So Very Smooth, and it allows you to make half square triangles and also flying geese units without marking any lines. And I fell in love with it, and I've used it for all my half square triangles and flying geese units since. So I'm going to show you how this works. So all you need is the ruler, and you can do it with one. I have two, which makes it even easier. And then a glue stick, a clear glue stick, and I stole this from one of my kids. And what you do is you take the glue stick and you run it along the diagonal line on one of the two fabrics, right down the middle, like you would with a pencil line, but you don't necessarily have to be as perfect as you would with a line. And then you line up that square on top of your second square. And of course, this would be right sides together, but I'm working with a solid, so both sides are right. And then you take the ruler, and it's got a stickiness on the back that you can kind of revive by washing it with soap and water. And you stick it so it goes from corner to corner on your square, just like that. And so because those are glued together, you can even pick it up, which is really nice. So you do that, and on this ruler, you can actually put two sets of half square triangles, so you can chain piece two in a row. I'm just doing one for you today. And then you take it to your sewing machine and line up the edge of your foot, so it just sews down the edge of your ruler right there. So here's where I did that. I used a green thread, so hopefully you can see the line a little bit. So I've got my first line stitched. And then you take the second ruler, if you have one, otherwise you just will reposition it yourself, and line the two rulers up together and pull the first ruler off, spin it around, and you can do the same thing, sew down that edge. And after you do that, you end up with a unit like this, just like if you were doing two at a time half square triangles with a line drawn down the center. And because yours would have just come off the sewing machine, you'd still have the ruler stuck on. Then with that ruler still on, you take your rotary cutter and you cut down the middle, and you have your two units. then you press them open and square them up, and you've got your 2 half-square triangle units with the time-saving step of not having to draw a line to do those half-square triangles. And I find that my half-square triangles are more accurate this way as well. So if you have not tried one of these and you make a lot of half-square triangles or flying geese, this is a great tool to have. So I hope that helps you if you are looking to make this quilt.
Thanks, Lisa. All right. Can we turn the spotlight off on Lisa's second camera? That's a great idea. I have one of those ideal seam guides, and I didn't realize that I'd never actually used it before until we were getting ready for this episode. And I was like, oh, I have one of those. Now I know what it's for. So I definitely will be using mine on half square triangles in the future. All right, so at this point, we're going to take just a moment and we're going to pop a quick poll up on the screen. If you answer the question that we put in our poll, then you will have a chance to win a fun, fabulous fabric surprise from Benartex, and we'll announce the winner at the end. So I think Lisa and I have been subscribers of the Fat Quarterly for definitely more than 10 years.
That is true. That is true.
I think we've been working together on the Fat Quarterly for at least 10 years.
I think that is correct as well.
So, all right. So next up, we'll hear from Jen Wagner, who is, as I said before, a pattern designer. Her company is Snapdragon Quilting, and she is also one of our ambassadors, our social stars for 2025. And she created the fenced-in runner that you see on the cover of the issue. So Jen, can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Absolutely. I had so much fun working on this project. And this quilt is one that I designed actually about 15 years ago. I had a really good friend who had worked in publishing and had published some children's books. And she saw that I would read patterns, but I really just make whatever I want as far as quilts go. And so she said, Jen, I love what you're doing. Let's write a children's book full of quilt patterns for kid quilts. And so I'm a sketcher, and so I got out some graph paper and I sketched out the design for this quilt. And I'll show you what the original design looks like in those colors, and then I've recolored it in more purples. And um, of course, I made the quilt and I was real busy. I had young kids and I was working full time as a nurse and I was long arming for people. And then she was in the Air Force and she got transferred. So we never wrote our children's book. But a few years ago, when I had the opportunity to step away from working in women's health, I really wanted to write this pattern. It had just been like the seed was planted so long ago, and it just needed to grow into the flowers. And so when Lisa asked me if I could use this pattern to do blooming color, I was thrilled. And I love that this collection has the 4 different colorways, and it actually works perfect to make flowers. And so when I design digitally too, so I started throwing these fabrics on my computer into my design. And how perfect is it that I could take the teal colors? Can you see that? Should I get it closer? There you go. So I could take the teal colors and I could layer them to make one flower. And then I've got the yellows and the greens, which work perfect for the middles and the leaves. And then since I was making a table runner, I took the blue colors and stacked those together too, so that I could, again, have the yellow and the greens for the centers and the leaves. So this fabric was just so easy to put into this design because it was designed so well. And I also, like Lisa, loved the lightness and the airiness and the springtime feeling of this fabric. So I used a white as a background just to let those colors breathe in them and let them pop. And then I love rail fence blocks, and rail fence blocks are so easy to make because you can just sew strips together and then cut them apart and rearrange them, and they make a darling little rail fence. And so it was fun to throw so many different colors and so many different fabrics, all the prints. I tried to get them all. Well, I got most of the prints in the rail fence block. Um, it's so easy to do. And the other thing that's really easy, I didn't tell you about the flowers, is they're all raw edge applique. So there are no curves to sew in this quilt. I just use a fusible web and I iron it onto the back of the fabric so that I can iron it on. And I've often had people ask me about this. How do you sew through all these layers of fusible web? So the trick is, of course, to use a really lightweight fusible web. And the other trick is to just iron the yellow onto the very first blue. And that way, so I've got a little blanket stitching on there. And when I'm top stitching, I'm only having to top stitch through the yellow and the blue. And then I can iron that onto the next layer. So I'm only having to top stitch then through. So I'm just sewing through 2 layers at a time. That makes it easy too. And of course, with the Fat Quarterly, you get 28 5-inch squares. So you get a square of all these different fabrics in this collection. And so my goal was to try and use every ounce of that fabric. So these are 5-inch circles, the biggest one. So you can use one of your 5-inch squares to start the circles. And then I made the block fit too, so you can put a strip in here. And then with everything that was left, I put it all around the edges. So you actually use all 28 squares in this project, and you just need a little bit of extra for your background. And so I call this pattern fenced in because it has a rail fence block. And like Ruth was talking about, it can be really hard to find a name that hasn't been used. I would have loved to call this, garden flowers or something. But since I've got that rail fence block, why not call it fenced in? And so I added a little border that makes me think about a fence around my garden. And that's the same that's in the original pattern. I have a contrasting border that just makes it look like the garden fence is protecting my flowers from the rabbits. We don't want them to eat it. But I wanted a border that would just really pop. So I went with I can't remember, is that the Emmy, that blue fabric there to really make that border pop. And then I saw in the comments, somebody loved the quilting. So I told you that I started as a long armor, but I was doing like computerized edge to edge 90 miles an hour so I could get everybody's quilts done. And so over the last few years, my goal has really been to learn to free motion quilt. I love the way it looks. So I had a lot of fun. I did do a little bit of marking, but not much to get the quilting done on these blocks. So, okay. So that's all about it.
Thanks, Jen. And yeah,
Yeah,
your quilting is amazing.
thank you.
And it's incredible that you managed to get every little scrap of all of those pieces into that little table runner. That's impressive.
There wasn't quite enough for the corners, so I had to put white in the corners.
And what did you put on the back?
Oh, thank you for asking. I loved the print that Lisa did for her big border, and it has the white as the background and it has all the colors in it. So it really ties it all together. It made a beautiful back.
Perfect. All right. So my next question for everyone is, have you ever wondered how we choose the photographs for our issue? If you have, Lisa's going to show you some of the other options that we had and kind of explain how we ended up using the ones that we did. So Lisa, I'll turn it back over to you.
All right. So I really enjoy being the editor of the Fat Quarterly because I get to play with all these fantastic fabrics every issue, but then I also get to work on the photo shoots, which is a lot of fun. And I can confirm that the quilting on Jen's table runner is gorgeous because I had it in my hands for the photo shoot and you'll see a little bit more of it, but she did a fantastic job on that. That's why I leave mine further away because my quilting is not quite that good. But so for this photo shoot, I live in Michigan and actually we have snow on the ground today. It came overnight. So this issue for the Spring Fat Quarterly is always a little challenging to shoot because we don't have pretty green grass or flowering trees or trees with anything on them. So no matter what our project is for this, projects are, two of them for the spring issue, we are pretty much always photographing inside. And so you've got to find other ways to make things look springy and light and fresh because the outdoors is not going to cut it. So we were lucky enough to be at a local home near me that had some great options for our photography. So I'm going to share my screen again and show you uh, some of the photos that we took and sort of the background behind them. Okay. So this is sort of a behind the scenes picture from behind the photographer. And this house, we go prop shopping and we find things that will coordinate with the projects to help enhance the photos. But we were really lucky that this house had this really pretty light spring green chair because it worked perfectly with this quilt. So we knew when we saw it that we were going to show the quilt on that chair. And then just that chair happened to be sitting by that painting. And if you look at the painting as a whole, it doesn't necessarily go with the quilt because it's actually you can't tell from this picture, but it is an abstract sea turtle. And the oranges and the reds are the shell of the sea turtle. But we weren't worried about that because we knew with the way the photo would be cropped that you'd only see a little portion of the photo, or sorry, of the painting in our photo. And that bottom right left corner of the painting is where the teals and the blues are. So that worked perfectly. So that was just a little happy accident that we had that piece of artwork behind to add a little bit something special to our picture. And then we got the turquoise little metal table that you see on the side, and you'll notice the yellow tulips. That was definitely one of our nods to making this look springy. Tulips are, an easy sign of spring. And then some little ceramic, a bird and a vase. And we try to find some things and a variety of colors that go with the quilt and go with our scene, and then we can kind of swap them out and see what works. And so you'll see some of the same props in different photos, but the idea is that there's enough options out there that we can show uh, different pictures with different props, so you're not seeing a lot of repeats. You can also see those big black boxes are the backs of the lights that we use to make sure that we get a nice bright shot of these quilts. So that was our first photo that we took. And then this is the close-up version, and in reality it was cropped even more than that. But you can see we take it real wide like that so that then when the art director is laying out the issue, she can crop it in however she needs to make it fit on the page and what looks visually pleasing because she's definitely the expert in that. So that was the finished picture that we gave to her to make work for the issue. But then we also we like to do two shots of each quilt, two different options. And a lot of times when you show a quilt folded up on a chair, it's harder to see the design of the quilt and like to see those zigzags and how they work across the quilt. So for a second option, this is not big enough for a bed quilt, but we laid it across the bed. Like if when I used to work for a quilt magazine, this was called the nap scenario, where you would have the quilt on the bed and then you could slide under it and take a nap to kind of put a storyline to it. And so we laid this quilt out across some white bedding, kept everything just real clean and white, both with the pillows, the headboard. And then you can see, I showed you two versions here. You can see the two different lamps that we used, and then in the one we used a plant, and then in the other the little vases again. Just again to give us some variety so that we have different props in different photos, and then the art director can look at these and see what will work with the page, with the mood of the issue, especially with the cover. We like to give lots of options for the cover because that is the page that's going to draw you into the issue. And then so this is my favorite part of this photo shoot because I knew a lot of times we'll go online and we'll look at photos of other quilts and other projects to see how they're photographed to give us inspiration. And I really like the way it looks when you photograph a table runner that's hanging off the edge of either a table or a breakfast buffet like this is. And I like it better on a buffet than a table because with the table you have the legs underneath and there's just some awkward negative space there. So when I saw this buffet, I thought, oh, this is perfect, except that it's red because there's no red in this fabric design. And every time I go to the photo shoot, I have these, I think they're like 30 by 25 inch. They're printed basically wood grain pieces that I use as backgrounds because when you zoom in, you can't tell that it looks like it's wood, and so it works. So what I did is I used painter's tape and I taped it right underneath that top wooden edge so that it covered up the red. So this is me standing behind the photographer taking this picture so that you all could see what it really looked like. And then when it's cropped in, this is what it looks like. We've got that shabby chic, kitchen buffet look. And you have no idea that it's actually a red piece of furniture that we're working with. So here are two different angles that we took. That's another thing that we focus on is, do we do it straight on? Do we do it from up above? You get to see both of the flowers a little bit, which is nice. So we take lots of different choices, and then the art director can choose what will work best. And sometimes I'll say, hey, I really love this one, or this is great because it shows off this quilt block, or it shows off the design. So it tends to be a bit of a process back and forth, but ultimately, our art director, Julie, does a great job laying these out, and she chooses what she wants to use, and then we'll weigh in if there's certain things we want to showcase either in a close-up, or you'll see there's some pictures on the editor's note page and that type of thing. And then we also then did a table shot with this, and you can see there's me prepping. The tulips came back, and I've learned over the years, especially with small table runners, that less is more. And by just putting, oh, there's a picture of what the photographer is seeing through her lens, which I just thought was a great photo. But if you look down at this, if we had, with a table runner this size, if we had put in plates and silverware and cups and salt and pepper shakers, it would be very, very crowded. But just by putting in the plates, you get that sense. Your mind says, okay, this is a table, there's plates, it's a table runner, that makes sense. And so you can see here we tried a couple different versions, one with a plant, one with the tulips again, and then with blue and gold plates or just the blue plates. We try a couple different variations of each thing, putting the table runner on an angle versus putting it straight. The trick with putting it on an angle is that if something isn't exactly straight, you can't tell, whereas if it lines up with the sides of the page, you can tell. So often an angle is the way to go. So there you can kind of see the different photos that we had for this issue. And if you want to see which ones we actually used in the magazine that are in the Fat Quarterly, you can open it up and take a peek and look throughout and see which of these you recognize on those pages. Back to you, Stephanie.
Great. Thank you so much, Lisa. Okay, so now we have time for some Q&A, and there is a question that I see in the box right now. Vicky Watkins asked, Lisa, did you sew with the seam guide attached? Is it not as high as a ruler? Thank you.
I do sew with it attached. It goes, I gotta hold this up because I got rid of my other camera. The edge of your presser foot will run right next to this ruler. And so it is, I mean, it's not quite a 1/4 inch, it's smaller than that. My friend who I got one of these from, because she had one and gave it to me, I can't remember what kind of machine she could not get it under hers. I have a Janome and it worked just fine with mine. I think it does work with most sewing machines, but it goes right next to your guide.
Okay. Thank you. And does anybody else have any questions? I don't remember if I saw any questions in the chat. I'm going to look back real quick and see.
I have a question.
Oh, good.
Lisa, what's the notch in the ruler for?
That's a good question. And it says on it, it is a workaround solution for wide feet and wide feed dogs.
Oh, okay, so you have two options. You can put your foot right against the edge, or you could sink it in a little.
I believe so. I do know that there are YouTube videos on the website that show how to use this, and I'm guessing they probably talk about how to use that. I did not watch them because I bought this at a show and they were doing demos at the show and I was sold, so I never looked further into it because it worked for me just like this. But I know they have videos that show how to demonstrate how to use the rulers.
A cool tool.
It is.
Very cool. Oh, so Linda Cousins is from Northwestern Michigan. I just thought I'd mention that. And she's actually at a retreat and piecing her spring zigzag quilts while she's there. Lisa's
Nice.
also from Michigan.
Fantastic. I bet she maybe has some white stuff up there as well.
I bet. Let me see. Do we have any other questions? No. So,
Okay.
if there aren't any questions, then I will go ahead and announce our winner. Um, Debbie Hanchett, you are our winner of our fabric bundle surprise. So we will reach out to you via email and get your information so that we can send you a prize. And I would also like to thank all of my panelists that are here today. Lisa, my co-host, Jen, thank you for coming and sharing all about your project. And Ruth, thank you for sharing all of the great information about the design process. I think that was very interesting and something that a lot of quilters don't might not think of when they go and pick up their fabric at a quilt shop. They just say, "Oh, it's such beautiful fabric," and might not really know all the inner workings of how that became a beautiful fabric for them to use. So thank you so much for being here to share with them.